Welcome to the Foreign Relations Committee, Madam Secretary. It's an honor to have you here. Nearly 4 years ago, Congress and the American people gave the President of the United States the authority to destroy Iraq's weapons of mass destruction and, if necessary, to depose a dictator. We know now that weapons of mass destruction were not there and that the dictator is no longer there as well. The Iraqis have held elections and they formed a government. But the country and our troops, in my view, are now embroiled in the midst of a vicious civil war. As of last night, according to the Pentagon, 3,009 Americans have lost their lives, over 22,000 have been wounded, and we have spent and committed hundreds of billions of dollars, and there seems to be no end in sight. For many months now, the American people have understood that our present policy is a failure, and they wanted to know and continue to want to know where we go from here. Last night, like millions of my fellow Americans, I listened intently to the President of the United States lay out his new strategy for Iraq. We all hoped and prayed that the President would present us with a plan that would make things better. Instead, I fear that what the President has proposed is more likely to make things worse. We hoped and prayed we would hear of a plan that would have two features: to begin to bring American forces home and a reasonable prospect of leaving behind a stable Iraq. Instead, we heard a plan to escalate the war, not only in Iraq, but possibly into Iran and Syria as well. I believe the President's strategy is not a solution. Secretary Rice, I believe it's a tragic mistake. In Iraq, the core of the President's plan is to send another 20,000 Americans to Baghdad, a city of more than 6 million people, where they will go with their fellow Iraqi soldiers door to door in the middle of a civil war. If memory serves me, we've tried that kind of escalation twice before in Baghdad, and it's failed twice in Baghdad, and I fear it will fail a third time. And the result will be the loss of more American lives and our military stretched to the breaking point with little prospect of success, and a further loss of influence in the region. Secretary Rice, this November, the American people voted for a dramatic change in Iraq. The President said, forthrightly, he heard them. But it seems clear to me from listening to him last night, he did not listen. And for the life of me, I don't understand how he could reject the overwhelming opposition to his plan from a broad, bipartisan cross-section of the country's leaders, military, civilian, and civic. As I understand it, the Joint Chiefs of Staff opposed this plan. Our commander in the region, General Abizaid, opposed the plan. Our commanders in Iraq, starting with General Casey, opposed this plan. The Baker-Hamilton Commission opposed this plan. And so did our greatest soldier statesman, Colin Powell. They all gave advice to the President that could be boiled down to two things. First, our military cannot stop the Shia, the Kurds, and the Sunnis from killing each other. The Iraqi people have to make very, very, very difficult political compromises in order for the killing to stop. And all of the people who gave advice to the President that I mentioned suggested that the best way to force the leaders and the people to make these hard compromises was to start this year to draw down our forces, not escalate them. The second consensus point from the advice the President got was that the way to secure this political solution, to secure Iraq, it was to secure support for whatever political solution the Iraqis arrived at from Turkey, Syria, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and all the neighbors. And there's a second reason for seeking that kind of support and consultation. It was that if, in fact, the civil war cannot be stopped, at least with a regional consensus, the hope would be it could be contained within Iraq. So, Secretary Rice, to be very blunt, I can in good conscience support the President's approach. But because there's so much at stake, I'm also not prepared to give up on finding a bipartisan way forward that meets the twin goals most Americans share, and I believe, I don't speak for anyone in this committee, but I believe most of my colleagues in the Senate share, and that is, how do we bring American forces home in an orderly way over the next year and leave behind a stable Iraq? In all my years in the Senate, Secretary Rice, I don't think we faced a more pivotal moment than the one we face today. Failure in Iraq will not be confined to Iraq. It will do terrible damage to our ability to protect our interest all over the world, and I fear for a long time to come. That's why we have to work together for a solution. I'm aware that the surge is not 22,000 people or 20,000 people getting in a boat, landing at one moment. The reason why I think there's still time for us to work out a bipartisan solution is that this is a process. We need a solution that will gain the support of our fellow citizens. I say to my colleagues, maybe because I got here in the midst of the Vietnam War, toward the end, I think we all learned a lesson, whether we went or didn't go, whether we were for it or against it, is no foreign policy can be sustained in this country without the informed consent of the American people. They've got to sign on. They've got to sign on. I just hope it's not too late. Mr. Chairman.